This week we continue the practice of Patch slipping in lessons about the myth of Ur wherever he has a chance in his schedule. So I am outside of the school where I teach comic book creation one day a week, and so I have a free moment, so we're going to jump into the myth of Ur. Last week with lesson 1, the story begins with Ur dying in battle. And something strange that happens when Ur dies is after 10 days, his body has still not decomposed when his fellow soldiers come to collect his body. They notice it's strange, but they're in the middle of a war. They don't have time to think about it. So they take it and they put his body on the funeral pyre, and suddenly he wakes up. The fire doesn't burn him up, it wakes him up, and so he pops off and he starts telling his story. And I think the lack of decomposition, his body not being destroyed by the flames ultimately is significant. His body here, in an alchemical sense, represents base material, unrefined humanity. And so psychologically, which I think we kind of pointed out last week, that the myth of Ur, or any myth, its true significance is in the psychological metaphor it represents for us. So his body represents the ego psychologically. Like I said, alchemically, that base matter to the alchemist, turning lead into gold. That lead was the base matter of humanity. It was our ego, our personality, our conscious self. And so it seems significant that what this story is telling us is that the ego isn't destroyed. It has some long-standing usefulness, or has some long-standing characteristics, which runs kind of counter to some of the stuff we learn in some spiritual practices and some spiritual schools, because a lot of them are all about the higher self transcending the ego and ego death and getting rid of ego. And I think what this story is telling us is that that's not necessarily the goal. The goal isn't to get past your ego, to get rid of your ego, because I think your ego becomes very important. Is it the whole ball game? Is it the whole ball of wax? Absolutely not. There is a need for your higher self, for your transcendent self, for what Jung would call the self. To come in and work with the ego consciousness. But I think the balance between those two is very necessary. If your higher self, if your transcendent self has maybe a mission for you in this world, something you're supposed to do, a reason that you're here, the ego self, the egoic personality, kind of becomes the tool that the higher self can use to accomplish this task. And so for that reason alone, it doesn't need to be destroyed. If your higher self is like, we got to build a house, your ego is kind of the hammer. You need the hammer. It's hard to get a nail into some wood without a hammer. So there's a usefulness to your ego that I think overrides this idea that you need to die to it or get rid of it. And so to me, that's kind of the message of this second little part of the myth of Ur, is that the ego needs to endure. It's a part of this process. And I've been reading some stuff lately that really is kind of shining a light on Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And the hierarchy of needs is all about, up to a point, is all about egoic needs. The first few rungs on hierarchies of Maslow are called deficiency needs, and they're the things that represent natural deficiencies that we need to fill for our own survival and our own thriving. So we need safety, we need relationships, we need a certain degree of self-esteem, and those are egoic needs. And when you get those egoic needs taken care of, then you can move towards the higher self. You can move towards transcendence. You can move towards self. I've completely lost the word that that Maslow uses. What is wrong with me? I can't think of this word. But basically, transcendence of the ego. And so, if you're a member of the $1 tier on the Patreon, we're putting up PDFs of exercises to help kind of drive home these lessons. And so the PDF I'll be uploading this week is not up yet, but the one I'll be uploading this week is kind of uses Maslow's hierarchy of needs as kind of a way to kind of assess your own life. Like, are the egoic needs being met? And if you're having trouble self-transcending, self-actualizing, that was the word I couldn't think of. If you're having trouble self-actualizing, it could be that your egoic needs haven't been fully met, because they have to be met to some degree before you can transcend into a higher state of being, before you can connect with your higher self, because they're survival needs, they're deficiency needs, like I said. So they represent something you are deficient in. So if you take care of those deficiencies, then you can kind of turn your attention towards the higher transcendent self. And so check out that PDF if you're at the $1 tier. If you're not at the $1 tier, if you're not a patron, come join us, and then you'll have access to these exercises to help you kind of move your own life through this map represented by Plato's myth of story. And so, yeah, that's what we're focusing on now. Is our ego not dead? Is it not destroyed? Is it not transcended? But are its needs taken care of so that we can functionally join it to a higher part of ourself? And so that's today's look at a myth of I've got a couple of free minutes now because I've taught my class, and now I've spoken to you guys about the myth of I may go sleep in my car because I have an ego need that I'm just dog tired right now. Okay, so thank you guys for listening, and talk soon.